hope, and they've missed the point entirely. And of course they have. Because according to the band's drummer, the song's about the anticipation of fatherhood, a song about being sent forth from the womb as if by a bouncer clearing out a bar. And obviously, Liz, we all knew that and got it from the lyrics. It's closing time, you're a baby, get out of that uterus and finish your whiskey and beer. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It seems every day brings terrible news concerning deportation policy, some of which has been so surreal, local news has had to run fact checks on it, like in this sponsored segment.
Tonight's Fact or Fiction is brought to you by America's Finest Carpet.
Tonight, we're looking into a comment allegedly made by the head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. A story you may have seen today claims acting ICE Director Todd Lyons said that he would like the agency to be run like Amazon Prime for human beings. And this is true.
Yeah, it is true. And spare a quick thought for that station and its sponsor, America's Finest Carpet. Because verifying ICE's director wanted to expel humans with the speed of a pack of emergency tampons on same-day delivery clearly isn't what their fact or fiction segment is for. It's for getting to the bottom of actual questions they've answered, like sharks test positive for cocaine, woman arrested for cinnamon roll attack, and Ford creates very gay raptor, which you'll be pleased to know was very much fact. But the intention behind that Amazon Prime idea gets to something important here. For all this administration's talk of prioritising hardened criminals, in practice, it seems to value speed, volume and spectacle over all else. Let's sum up the fact, at a rally on Tuesday, Trump directed the audience's attention to a grotesque video of men getting deported to a Salvadoran prison, being marched off an airplane and having their heads shaved, prefacing it by telling the cheering crowd those men were the worst of the worst. Despite the fact, when 60 Minutes looked into it, they couldn't find criminal records for 75% of the men on those flights. And Trump's own administration has conceded that at least one man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, was sent there due to an administrative error. For weeks now, it has been scrambling to come up with reasons why it was okay to send that man to a foreign prison, which has been hard for them to do, given that he had a court order protecting him from deportation to El Salvador and no criminal record. At one point, Trump posted a photo of himself holding an image that had been circulating online of Abrego Garcia's hand, with labels added suggesting the tattoos on his knuckles was somehow secret code spelling out MS-13. Multiple gang experts have disputed that, pointing out MS-13 tattoos tend to feature things like the letters M, S, and the numbers 1 and 3. But in an interview on Tuesday, Trump not only defended posting that image, he argued that the letters and numbers that had clearly been superimposed were actually tattooed on his hand, and he refused to let go of that idea for an agonisingly long time. And while you may have seen small clips of this exchange, it is worth watching the full 90 seconds, because it is absolutely incredible.
The man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang, and then they looked, and on his knuckles he had MS-13. Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles too.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop. So let me.
Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. I picked you, Terry, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I'll move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And you think it's Photoshop?
Well, here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Don't look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine,
No,
sir. I want to get to Ukraine.
He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because it's fake news.
In El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No.
But they're in the picture. Terry,
Ukraine, sir.
he's got MS-13 on his knuckles. Okay? It's such a disservice.
We'll take a look.
Just saying, yes, he does, and go on to something else.
Everybody in Congress refused to point out that it was...
Terry, you're in hell, Terry. Terry, this is hell right now. I'm genuinely shocked Trump doesn't drink alcohol, because that is the most drunk at an IHOP conversation I think I've ever heard. And no disrespect to Terry, but maybe don't move on from that. I know you've got other questions to get to, but if the President of the United States is trying to tell you that this amateur hour Photoshop is real, let him go get the picture and make him say it again. Point to that Helvetica-looking M and make the President say, yes, I believe that artless M that's really clearer and darker than all the other tattoos is real. Make him say, I believe that man went to a tattoo parlour and said, the skull's pretty spooky, but what I'd really like is a neatly aligned 3 directly on the bone of my knuckle, and can you please make it so that it doesn't stretch or bend with the natural curves of the human hand, and also make it look like a typewriter did it? Because, Terry, sometimes, when Trump's doing his normal racist blue sky, you do need to cut him off to slow the flow of hatred into the world. But if he wants to tell America that this laughably doctored picture is evidence of a major threat to American safety, you have an obligation to let the man cook. You probably should be doing that in court, not on TV, and after he's already shipped someone off to a foreign prison. But Abrego Garcia is just one of many horrifying stories surrounding immigration right now, from tourists being detained for weeks, to US citizens being caught up in ice trap nets, to videos like this.
You can see an agent using a large hammer to break the back passenger window of their car. Mary Lou said the agents were focused on her husband Juan, but kept calling him Antonio. That's the name of another man who lives in their building. Thinking this is a case of mistaken identity, Juan called his attorney, who told him to stay in the car until she got there. But instead of waiting for their lawyer, the agent smashed the car window, broke into the vehicle, and dragged the couple out.
They had no reason to detain him. We've been following the rules of this country. We're doing things the right way. That's why we have a lawyer.
Right. They're trying to do things the right way. We have an asylum process in place. And while it is not perfect, I don't think a key step in it is guy smashes your car with a hammer while screaming someone else's name at you. But that's just the tip of the iceberg here. So given that tonight, let's look at Trump and deportations, the aggression of his administration's crackdowns, its blatant contempt for the law, and where this could be heading. Let's start with the fact Trump's off to a much quicker start than last time around. In its first 100 days, this administration has taken 181 immigration-specific executive actions, a 6-fold increase over that same period in Trump's first term. And that is deliberate. As the head of one anti-immigration group that advises the White House has put it, the plan has been to do everything all at once, everywhere. Which sounds less like rational government policy and more like a knockoff DVD sold on the subway. And to do that, they've employed a wide variety of tactics. Sometimes they've gotten creative by looking through old statutes for cheat codes to expedite deportations. We've talked before about how they tried using an obscure provision of the Immigration and Nationality Act to remove people if the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe their presence here would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. That is the reason they gave for arresting students like Mahmoud Khalil. And while that was clearly a targeted attempt to frighten students out of voicing solidarity with Palestine, they've also taken much broader swings, using a federal database that tracks even the slightest interactions with law enforcement to revoke visas and put thousands of international students in jeopardy. And some of the cases have been truly absurd, like this grad student who was suddenly told he had 15 days to leave the country.
Suguru Anda, getting a PhD at Brigham Young University in Utah, had his legal status in the U.S. suddenly revoked after a criminal records check. But Anda, from Japan, had no criminal charges on his record, just 2 speeding tickets and a citation for catching 1 too many fish, his attorney says.
That is ridiculous. If you could be flagged for deportation for catching 1 too many fish, then I truly fear for Henry Winkler. We could be just days away from seeing him in an El Salvador prison, which I'm sure the White House will then justify by badly photoshopping an MS-13 tattoo onto his neck. And while they later reversed that specific decision, this all feels like the inevitable result of a campaign that fear-mongered about an epidemic of so-called migrant crime, which, as we've discussed before, was wildly overblown, but having promised mass deportations and even printed signs for people to wave around demanding them, they're now scrambling to deliver. While the administration denies it, ICE officials have reportedly been told to aggressively ramp up the number of people they arrest from a few hundred per day to at least 12 to 1,500. With the idea being each of the agency's field offices should make 75 arrests per day. And for all of this administration's promises of a worst first strategy where they focus on those with criminal histories, as a former director of ICE pointed out 3 months ago, that was always unlikely to last.
Sarah Saldana believes if arrest numbers don't increase as rapidly as the administration hopes, it might abandon the worst first strategy and begin targeting community locations like day labor sites.
That is really a big concern of mine, because that's not again, a stretch to think that that might happen next. If the numbers are not coming through, let's get the low-hanging fruit.
Right, and you should avoid low-hanging fruit. I tried to do that. If I were to constantly go for low-hanging fruit, I'd say that worst first doesn't describe Trump's immigration policy so much as it describes his children. But again, I've avoided saying that because I have standards, so I won't do it. And the administration now seems desperate to scoop anyone up. Police in places like upstate New York have been stopping Hispanic drivers for minor traffic violations, and if they're undocumented, handing them over to Border Patrol agents. Also, at one point, tens of thousands of people received emails explicitly telling them to please leave the United States immediately. Some of those were sent by mistake to American citizens, while others went to migrants with a legal right to be here. The fact is, what the administration is doing is sometimes targeted, sometimes arbitrary, usually blatantly racist, and always cruel, and sometimes breathtakingly so.
Tonight, the administration is facing criticism from migrant advocates over the removal of 2 American citizen children of an undocumented woman from Honduras, including her 4-year-old son. A migrant rights group says he was sent to Honduras without his medication for stage 4 cancer. How is going after families with young kids targeting the worst of the worst?
First of all, we said we're going to prioritize the worst of the worst.
You feel like that's what you're doing?
Absolutely. But when you prioritize something, it doesn't mean you forget about everybody else. I've said from day one, if you're in the country with me, you're not off the table.
Okay, first, Tom Homan can truly rot in hell, though I'd expect nothing less from a man who clearly answers the question, what would Shrek look like as a white ogre? And while the government insists that woman chose to have her son deported with her, her lawyers insist that was not, in fact, the case. And either way, between the government putting that kid on a plane without his medication and the cuts to research at the NIH, it seems this administration's actively coming out pro-pediatric cancer. I feel there's a non-zero chance Trump's about to add a fucking brain tumour to his cabinet, and then presumably RFK's either going to eat it or point at it and say, it's from Wi-Fi. But one of the boldest moves they've made to circumvent due process is invoking what's called the Alien Enemies Act, a 1798 law that allows the president to detain or deport non-citizens without a hearing and based only on their country of birth or citizenship if he decides that an invasion or predatory incursion by that country is underway. It was famously used to justify the internment of Japanese, Italian, and German immigrants in World War II. But Trump has now invoked it again, saying it lets us do a lot of the things we wouldn't be able to do. He's issued an absurd proclamation declaring a Venezuelan gang called Tren Aragua, or TDA, has invaded the United States. And he's used that as a pretext to sweep people up in raids, label them as gang members, and deport them. Some have been shipped off to Sabotage, a notorious mega prison in El Salvador. And if you've only seen it in Trump's propaganda videos or in Kristi Noem's grotesque photo op, it is worth knowing just how grim it is in there.
Inmates are assigned to one of 8 sectors, each roughly the size of an airplane hangar, basically prisons within the prison. Once inside, it's said to be a life sentence. They'll never leave their assigned sector. Each sector holds more than 24 large cells, roughly 80 inmates per cell, but that can fluctuate. Inside each cell, toilets, a concrete basin for bathing, and a barrel of drinking water. Several rows of metal bunk beds. No mattresses, no sheets, no privacy.
Yeah, it is awful in there. The Salvadoran Justice and Security Minister has even bragged that no one who enters the Sabotage will ever walk out. They will only be able to leave in a coffin. And you'll only be able to leave in a coffin is a horrifying statement no matter where it is. Even if it was on a sign outside a literal coffin dealership, it'd be a bit much. I get you're just trying to make a sale, but come on, tone it down. And look, sending anyone there is unforgivable, whatever they're accused of, but it's worth noting we've not only done it without due process, in many cases we've done it without cause. Remember, on those first plane loads, 3/4 of the people had no discernible criminal record. And while Tom Homan has insisted that that doesn't mean anything because a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories, you clearly should be sending people to a Central American forever dungeon just on vibes. And the government's evidence in some of these cases is just absurdly weak. Take Andre Hernandez Romero, a Venezuelan stylist who's in the middle of seeking asylum in the US to escape persecution for his political views and the fact that he's gay. Time magazine photographed him having his head shaved upon arrival at Sabotage, with the photographer saying he was crying for his mother. And as his lawyer points out, The evidence the government's shown to justify that is ridiculous.
In Andre's case, the only evidence the government presented in immigration court were these pictures of his tattoos. Crowns, which immigration authorities say can be a symbol of Tren de Aragua.
The crowns themselves were on top of the names of his parents. The most possible explanation for that are that his mom and dad are his king and queen.
A Department of Homeland Security spokeswoman said on social media that its intelligence assessments go well beyond just gang affiliate tattoos. She said Andre's own social media indicates he is a member
because
of Tren de
if
Aragua.
brown people
He went back a decade and
start respecting their elders, God forbid they start respecting themselves.
Evidence? What about this man? Screams violent gang member. The only thing I'm actually confident he's a genuine threat to is unaccented cheekbones. And for what it's worth, there are no tattoos that denote membership to TDA. An expert who wrote the book on them has said Venezuelan gangs are not identified by tattoos. But apparently the Trump administration has been relying on an alien enemy validation guide, specifically its scoring system, under which 8 points are required for any individual to be identified as a member of Tren de Aragua. But that is not a high bar, as you can get 4 points simply for having tattoos denoting membership or loyalty to TDA, which again is not a thing. And 4 points if you display logos or dress known to indicate allegiance to TDA, which can be as simple as being dressed in high-end urban streetwear, especially basketball jerseys from the Chicago Bulls. But that is clearly bullshit, because if that is all it takes, then 75% of the city of Chicago are TDA from October to April, and somehow it gets even dumber.
Tattoos and social media were also used to link another Venezuelan migrant, Jersey Reyes Barrios, to the Tren de Aragua gang. Immigration court documents include this Facebook post from 15 years ago, showing him flashing what officers said was a gang sign. His girlfriend told us it was all about rock and roll. Immigration agents also flagged Jersey's crown tattoo as a gang symbol, but they did not mention the crown is above a soccer ball. Jersey was a soccer player in Venezuela. His lawyer says the tattoo honors his favorite team, Real Madrid.
That is pathetic. And as for this picture of Jersey supposedly throwing up gang signs, if that were true, Rihanna, Fergie, and former President George W. Bush are all Tren de Aragua too. But when confronted on this in court, the government's been completely unrepentant. Early on, they violated a judge's orders to turn around planes carrying deportees to El Salvador, and even after the Supreme Court explicitly directed they facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody there, they chose to dick around about the exact meaning of the word facilitate. As for Trump, when he was pressed on whether the people he sent to El Salvador deserve any sort of due process, he said this.
You know, we have thousands of people that are ready to go out. And you can't have a trial for all of these people. And a judge can't say, no, you have to have a trial. The trial's going to take 2 years. And you know, we're going to have a very dangerous country if we're not allowed to do what we're entitled to do.
But that's not how anything works. You can't just opt out of due process because it's inconvenient. It's why court orders don't tend to end with, if not, no worries, you do you. And the thing is, this could all get worse, because, well, thankfully, the courts have tried to curb Trump's use of these two acts. They've also seemed to sign off on a new diabolical strategy the administration's been using, involving a decades-old legal provision called registration of aliens. It allows the administration to require undocumented people register with the government and carry proof of that registration. And it is clearly a trap, because if you register and give the government all your information, you become an easy target. But if you don't, or a court not carrying proof, you can be charged with a federal misdemeanor, allowing them to label you a criminal and putting you at risk of deportation. And this is already happening. People have been charged in Texas and Arizona using this mechanism. Basically, they can't find enough criminals to deport, so they found a way to turn more people into criminals so that they suddenly can. It's a desperate but depressingly effective move. And that's not even getting into the other plans they've teased. From Marco Rubio saying we are actively searching for other countries to take people, to the administration floating the idea of labelling suspected gang members as enemy combatants. They've also tried to stop anyone who stands in their way. Just last week, they arrested a judge in Wisconsin for supposedly helping an immigrant evade ICE. And on Thursday, ICE made a big production and have served a search warrant as part of the investigation into these flies that were posted months ago with information about ICE agents on them. They even released dramatic footage of them rolling up to the house of their target's parents, who were understandably pretty surprised.
Drone video this morning shows ICE agents moving into an urban neighborhood. Annie Yang and Yuzong Cheng are still in shock after being woken up by Homeland Security investigators.
Woke up to this morning.
Neighbors captured the scene outside their home. They described hearing, "We have a warrant, come out with your hands up," over a loudspeaker.
Never happened to us before.
I feel like I was in a movie set or something. It's so real.
Yeah, I'm afraid this is real life though. 17 vehicles with armed agents did a zero dark 30 on a lovable middle-aged couple looking for a guy who put up flyers warning about ICE overreach. Fun fact, guess who was on site for that raid? The ICE acting director who said the Amazon Prime thing. Guess who wasn't there? The guy they were looking for, as he apparently moved to New York last month. A mistake for the record that Amazon would not make. And while that's almost laughably absurd, it's also obviously scary and extremely dangerous. And it kind of gets to the heart of all of this, which is Trump loudly saying he supported the law that would protect them from existential threats, and to further government overreach and state violence, even while deporting makeup artists, unlucky soccer fans, and 4-year-olds with cancer. So what can we do? Well, some of this depends on elected leaders, and to their credit, a number of prominent Democrats have gone to El Salvador to call attention to this, which is definitely preferable to the approach that others have taken, with some anonymous House Democrats quoted as saying, should it be the big issue for Democrats? Probably not. And complaining, rather than talking about the tariff policy and the economy, we're going to go take the bait for one hairdresser. Which is absolutely enraging, especially as many voters do seem to get the clear problem with deporting people without due process to a prison for life, even in red states. Here's Chuck Grassley being confronted at a town hall in Iowa.
They're going to bring in backpackers from El Salvador. Why not? The Supreme Court said to bring it back.
He's defying the Constitution.
Trump don't care.
If I get an order, say a ticket for $1,200 and I just say no, does that stand up? Because he got an order from the Supreme Court and he just said no.
Exactly! Exactly! That man, who definitely owns a real $1,200 ticket, is right on the nose there. The president is clearly not following the law as he is required to. And look, if your elected officials aren't holding town halls, you can still tell them you care about this issue. Call them and say if they believe in due process, they should work to repeal the Alien Enemies Act and amend the part of Section 237 of the INA that lets Marco Rubio decide whose free speech is a threat. But in the meantime, we're going to need to help immigrants defend themselves. Remember, those in immigration court are not guaranteed a lawyer. And if they don't have one, their chances are basically zero. So if you can, it is worth supporting non-profits like these that provide legal services for immigrants or local ones in your community. And this is an issue where I do think there is a practical value to public protest, because this is going to be in the courts, and those inside them need to be made aware of public opinion on this, because it can make a difference. Former Supreme Court Chief Justice William Rehnquist once wrote that no honourable judge would ever cast his vote because he thought the majority of the public wanted him to vote that way, but that in certain cases, judges are undeniably influenced by the great tides of public opinion. And I would argue the moment we're in right now isn't just worthy of a great tide, it is worthy of a fucking tsunami. Because this is an absolute outrage. And it is one where it is important to remind our elected leaders that all people are worthy of safety, protection, and due process. Because that is indisputable. In the words of this country's single weirdest carpet-sponsored local news segment, a fucking fact. And now, this.
National Shrimp Scampi Day. Very niche. I love shrimp scampi.
I love a good shrimp dish. I feel like pasta is my favorite. I know it's very basic. It's like a fettuccine with shrimp.
That's not basic at all. It is National Shrimp Scampi Day.
Shrimp Scampi Day. Oh,
That's good stuff.
Shrimp Scampi Day. I'm just stuck on that.
Man, hopefully somebody's doing some deals around town. I feel like we get pretty lucky if we found that.
So dig in and don't scrimp on the shrimp. But you know, I bet shrimp could have TVs. They would love to watch Prawn Stars. Lots of them love to scrimp.
Shrimp Scampi.
You can have mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're not eating the shrimp scampi? Why?
I'm not into seafood that much.
Oh, Carl.
Got some shrimp at home. It's begging to be scampied. Yeah. Scampi it up. Scampi it up tonight, maybe. There you go. 1992 on this date, the riots in L.A. began following the acquittal of police officers charged with excessive force in the beating of Rodney King.
Moving on. Finally tonight, a quick word about baseball. America's official national pastime, not to be confused with its unofficial national pastime, clicking Remind Me Later on software updates. Specifically, we're going to talk about minor league baseball, the network of teams that functions as a farm system for players. There are currently 120 full-season minor league teams interfiliated with a major league club. And if you have one in your town, you may be familiar with them thanks to eye-catching promotions like this one last year from the Lake County Captains in Ohio.
We thought, why don't we rip out 2 sections and put in toilets and work with the and that's what we did.
Can I be so bold as to ask why you went for the toilet seats? That's amazing. Yeah. I was trying to see if we could use them.
I love all of that, from the fact that he's wearing a t-shirt that says bunt stuff to the toilets themselves. It's less like stadium seating and more like a production number from an all-toilet version of the chorus line. They might not be functional. That guy there seems 2 white claws away from saying, fuck it, I'm taking a dump here anyway. Minor league baseball teams are really good at publicity. They kind of have to be, as while their player contracts are handled by major league teams, they're responsible for many other operating costs which can be significant, so they go out of their way to try and grab people's attention, starting with eye-catching team names like the Hub City Spartan Burgers, or the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, or the Modesto Nuts. Those are just the ones named after food. There's also the Richmond Flying Squirrels, the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, and the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. Incidentally, Rumble Pony sounds less like the name of a baseball team and more like Australian slang for a bike. G'day, mate, just picking the kick out of the old Rumble Pony right now. I'm bloody naked. The names of minor league teams have actually gotten even more creative in recent years as they discovered that a flashy reboot can really boost ticket sales. Here's a marketing exec with one team in Alabama explaining the gamble that they took on a team name that really paid off.
The ownership group hesitated a lot using the word trash in their name. I don't want trash to be associated with our name. You can't have trash. That's not going to be a good look. It's not going to sell.
But oh, did it sell? The Rocket City trash tables with their logo featuring a raccoon and a trash can rocket ship exploded.
We sold $2.3 million in merchandise before playing a trash can this game.
Of course you did! I cannot believe that ownership group thought that idea for a single second. Because if you told me my idea for making people buy things is to put a raccoon in a trash can rocket ship, my first, second, and third reaction would be, good idea, you're about to be a billionaire. Because you can't not buy merch like that once you know it exists. Case in point, go trash pandas. Beyond rebrandings, teams also throw theme marks that can be both weird and incredible. The now defunct Long Spinners, for instance, once held a bubble wrap night where nearly 3,700 fans popped bubble wrap at the same time. Do you want to hear what it sounded like? Of course you do.
Okay, ready, set, go!
Idea, flawless execution. And if you think wasn't that quite a lot to go through to produce a sound best described as sizzling fajita plates? Hey, shut the fuck up! Let things be fun! But that is not all. One night, the El Paso Chihuahuas played a whole game in this absolutely unhinged jersey. They had their own general manager to say, I'll never forget the first time I saw it. It's so terrible, it's perfect. Which, hard to agree, and to spare a thought for the opposing team, because how could they focus on the game when everywhere they turn they see a massive chest chihuahua staring directly into their soul? Then there was the incredible specificity of Helen McGuckin Night. What's Helen McGuckin Night? I'm so glad you asked. In 2018, the Charleston River Ducks received a Google review from a random woman named Helen McGuckin that said, just drove by, 2 out of 5 stars. In response, they devoted an entire night to trying to impress her and change her review. They got hold of her and she agreed to come, but then apparently she backed out at the last minute. But rather than abandon the idea, they asked their office manager to play the role of Helen McGuckin. And even though she was nervous, they encouraged her by telling her to pretend it's Administrative Professional Appreciation Day. Just be yourself and have fun, but if people say, hey Helen, feel free to wave at them. Here she is as Helen McGuckin. And as far as I'm concerned, she really nailed that role. To be honest, for that team's relentless ingenuity, I give them, unlike Helen, 5 fucking stars. Teams will also sometimes just change their name for a night or for a handful of games. The New Hampshire Fisher Cats, for instance, are taking a term this year as the Space Potatoes. And the Amarillo Sod Poodles briefly changed their name each year to the Amarillo Calf Fries, named after the battered bull testicles they actually sell at those games. And in 2018, the Syracuse Chiefs, now the Syracuse Mets, played one game as the Syracuse device, specifically the Brannick device. And if you think you don't know what a Brannick device is, you're wrong, because it is this foot measuring thing. It was invented in Syracuse, and they wanted to pay tributes to it, which they did in multiple ways, from designing this mascot to introducing members of the opposing team on the big screen by putting their face inside a foot. Right foot if they're right-handed, left foot if they're left-handed. But wait, because it gets one step better. My absolute favourite rebrand concerns the Eugene, Oregon Emeralds. They managed to triple merchandise sales to nearly $1 million in a single season by occasionally playing as the Exploding Whales, which is already a good name. But gets even better when you learn it's a nod to a notorious 1970s blunder when a dared smelly 8-ton whale washed ashore in Oregon, and the state highway agency thought it'd be a fine idea to use explosives to blast the carcass to smithereens and let seagulls take care of the remains. This is the whale in question, and if you've never seen the footage of what happened next, I'll let the local news from back then fill you in.
The camera stopped rolling immediately after the blast. The humor of the entire situation suddenly gave way to a run for survival. Huge chunks of whale blubber fell everywhere. The goons were rapidly evacuated as spectators escaped both the fallen debris and the overwhelming smoke. Fortunately, no human was hit as badly as the car, but everyone on the scene was covered with small particles of dead whales.
Why would you not name a minor league baseball team after a historic moment like that? And while all these rebrandings have been perfect, I will say there have been some recent missteps. For instance, this year the Chesapeake Bay Sox in Maryland revealed an alternative identity as the Oyster